80 beats per minute just at the beginning of Andante. And we'll talk more about that. But first of all, welcome everybody to another episode of Dulcimerica. My name is Futch and I'll be your host again as we get into some more music tricks, tips, workshops, and demonstrations. And before I go any further, I'd like to give a big shout out to one of my patrons on Patreon, Mr. Kirk House. Thank you very much, man, for your support and your encouragement. And to all of my patrons out there, we've got a lot of new ones on board. Hello, thank you very much. For those of you wanting to know more about what Patreon is, you can go to the URL that's right down here. That is patreon.com/bingfutch. Watch the video, check out the incentives, and make sure you visit the patron-only feed. Even though it's for patrons only, there's a whole bunch of feed items that I've made public so that you can see and download all kinds of free music, tablature, and other stuff, and get a feel for what it's like, what I'm offering there through the Patreon drive. So thank you again, Kirk, very much, and for everybody being a part of the art. Today I am going to do a Dulcimer segment. After the success of the top 10 things you can do to improve your mountain dulcimer playing from episode number 300 at the end of 2015, I've been getting a lot of emails from people thanking me for putting that episode up and listing their favorite numbers for things that they were planning on doing anyway in the year 2016. And one of the things I've gotten the most comments about is how to use the metronome when you're working on your daily exercises and repertoire building. So I figured I'd focus on that a little bit, and I got actually quite a few emails this week. So you know who you are out there. And so here it is, instant delivery, and we'll talk about the metronome. First of all, what good is a metronome? Well, music is based on a foundation of rhythm. Now, not all of it is. Some of it can be very non-rhythmic or arrhythmic. But a lot of us very much like to have a nice set tempo. In fact, our heartbeat has a very, very nice steady tempo usually, and if it doesn't, then you have to get yourself checked, I think. But there is speeding up and slowing down, but it happens gradually. But we like a nice consistent tempo because it just awakens something primal inside of all of us, I do believe. So music that has a nice consistent tempo and smooth transitions between tempos is the stuff that we can relate with the most. If you're playing a piece of music and it just seems a little off, it can be very, very hard to follow what's going on, to invest yourself in the music, and it can be really hard to dance to. But if you've got something with a nice, strong, consistent beat, easy to follow, easy to get into, and you can shake your booty to it, which is always, always a good thing. So what the metronome does is it basically is an electronic thing, and electronic things usually are pretty dang perfect when it comes to how they measure out data, and this measures out ticks in what are called beats per minute. And every piece of music has a tempo, whether it's denoted by beats per minute, BPMs, or whether it's got a term at the very, very beginning of a piece of music to show how fast, say, for example, a conductor should get the orchestra going. And these are Italian words that you'll see marked at the beginning of a music score. And they often can be found on the metronome itself. Like on this one, you start off with largo, which is really very, very slow and progressive. And then you've got larghetto, adagio, getting a little quicker now, andante, moderato, allegro, quick and lively, presto, which is really, really super fast, and then prestissimo, which is ridiculously fast, and that's where a lot of your house music is, right up there at the top. And this particular metronome I have is a Seiko. It's an old one. It's a quartz metronome. I've had this metronome for a very long time. But as you can see around the dial there, you just go ahead and you move the dial to the number you want. It does not have every single number. So if you're, say, for example, you're looking for 82 beats per minute, you're not going to find it on this one. You're going to find 80 and 84. So you'll pick the one that's closest to you. A lot of other metronomes, however, do have a way to dial in the exact beats per minute, even allowing you to tap it in the tempo that you want to match your playing. This is another metronome on my iPhone, and there are better metronomes out there, but I tend to keep it simple because the more bells and whistles you get, the more time you spent fussing with the thing, trying to get the setting that you're looking for, and I'd rather just sit and pick, wouldn't you? That's what I thought. So let's get back over here to the old school metronome. This one has a beat, the click sound, and that's what you want to be listening for. And you can see it also has a red light that flashes there, and you can use that as a visual beat in case you don't want to have that click going on. That's helpful if you don't want to have if you're recording and you want a metronome click, but you don't want to have the sound of a click get in your recording. You can see there that that red light is still flashing. It's a little tricky to follow it, but once you get used to it, you can maneuver that pretty well. So here I can dial in all of my beats per minute. I've got my light, I've got my click, and I've even got a little jack right there that I can plug some headphones into so I can put it in my ear. So that's another way of recording, and that's using a click track. If you're recording, you'll hear the click, but the click won't end up going into the microphone when you're playing. Now, that's just a very standard click, and those beats that you're hearing, those little clicks that you're hearing, you'll notice that there is no emphasis on the one. So I can use this metronome for any time signature, whether it be 4/4 time, 3/4, 6/8, 9/8. I can use 5/4 time. This metronome will work. It does not give the downbeat. If you like to have the downbeat, and that's not a bad thing to have, to understand when you're coming in on the one, and to get you more used to working in different types of time signatures, you'd want to get something like this. I've got this set for about 68 beats per minute, which is a nice round slow tempo to work your exercises. You hear the clicks? That higher click you hear right there is the downbeat. Downbeat, 2, 3, 4. Downbeat, 2, 3, 4. That lets you know when the measure is beginning. So if I were to change this metronome now, that might be a little awkward to look at. I'm going to change it now. That looks like it's going to be backwards. I hope it's not. I'm going to change it now to 3/4 time. And I'll set that for 68 beats per minute. And now you'll hear the high sound and then 2, 3, high sound, 2, 3, as it marks the beginning of the measure. So, which do I think is better? It depends on what you're working on. And obviously, if you've got a metronome with all the bells and whistles, and you can set it for any time signature, with or without a downbeat sound, that's going to be your best choice. And it's just really up to you what you want to focus on. If you feel like you are familiar with the beginning of a measure and where that one comes in, then you can just focus on keeping a nice steady tempo. If you're still a little confused about how to make it through a measure and land that one, then I would use the one that gives you the ability to accent the downbeat as well. Really up to you. As long as you're working with the metronome, because it is perfect, and we are not. And I always recommend using it 50% of the time, and then the other 50% of the time, go ahead and trust your inner clock. Because we're not perfect, and we're never ever really going to be as perfect as the metronome, unless you're Tony Banks of Genesis. He is the human sequencer. Beyond that, very, very difficult. And most music does have a give and take, an ebb and a flow, where the music may sometimes imperceptibly even slow down and speed up. That's natural, that's good. Many of you can tell when you're listening to a piece of music that's been done with a drum machine that's perfect, because it's just too perfect. But those little imperceptible, very subtle changes in tempo, they reflect the human condition, and the music that we listen to should reflect the human condition as well. That's why they're making drum machines now with the real feel. You program the machine and it puts in imperfections so that it sounds more like a person. It's so funny how things work. So how would you use this in practice? I would start off with exercises. Let's take scales, for example. And I always suggest starting at somewhere around 66, 68 beats per minute. It's a nice slow tempo. We'll go ahead and kick on the beat. I'll set this over here. Each one of those is going to be one quarter note. So I'm going to start off just playing the scales like this. It's very, very slow. And I'll do this over and over again. The reason I like 68 beats per minute, 69 beats per minute, is there's sort of a waiting time in between the beats. So it's not coming fast and quickly where your hand is always moving. You sort of have to be patient and wait for those quarter notes, and that patience will pay off. Learning to hang in the subdivision area in between the quarter notes is super important. And one way you can do that is just to think about the subdivisions. That'd be the 8th notes and the 16th notes. So even though I'm playing quarter notes, inside my head I have another little metronome going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and... So I'm getting 8 eighth notes in that measure, and that little point in my head is the middle ground in between beat 1 and beat 2, getting that and in there. One of the things I like about the old-fashioned metronome, and I was just looking up a whole bunch of metronomes this morning on the in the iPhone App Store. The reason I really like this design, look at that dirty screen. Look at those greasy fingers. I ate bacon this morning. I swear I washed my hands, I really did. I like about this, I call it a clock or a pendulum metronome, but the old kind of piano metronome that sat on the piano bench. The thing I really like about that as a visual, we're still on 3/4 time. Let me go ahead and switch that back to 4/4 for our example here. The thing I really like about this, the outside edge of the pendulum swing are your quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But that middle section right there where the metronome chills out when it's not doing anything, that's your halfway point. That is the perfect halfway point in between your quarter notes. So whenever the pendulum comes back to center, that's your and. So we could count that as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So your subdivisions are all planted right there for you visually, and that helps you quite a bit. There is no subdivision for the metronome I have over here, and I think some of the modern ones may actually do that. Another way of doing it is you can just simply crank up the speed on the metronome. So if we're at 66, let's take it to around 120, and let's just pretend that each one of these beats is now an 8th note instead. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. You would use your 1, 2, 3, 4 count for your quarter notes on every other beat of the metronome, but you would count every single one at this tempo as an 8th note. Or so there are a number of different ways that you can approach how you use the metronome. You can even get it really ridiculous. Let's go ahead up to prestissimo. Let's go to 208 beats per minute. One E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a for your 16th notes. Now that beat is still giving you 8 notes. What you're doing is you're adding in another strum to get your 16th notes in there. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... This is great for practicing your in-out strum with your right hand, alternating pick direction on the 8 notes. nice and consistent. Do this for like 10 minutes straight, and you'll find yourself about the 5th minute doing 2 things. One, you'll go, oh my God, this is boring. Second, you'll go, hey, I'm kind of on the beat here. So you have to keep working at it. And one of the hardest things to do is to have a conversation with people while you're doing this, because you're talking in a different rhythm and playing according to the metronome. When you can get to the point when your right hand is unconscious about what it's doing, yet still on track, you're well on your way to developing a nice, solid internal clock. Now let's go to 16th notes. You can of course practice your 16th notes a lot slower, but interestingly enough, the slower you go with 16th notes, the more they sound just like 8 notes. So say like 116 beats per minute. Let's consider those to be 8-note tones that we're hearing. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and we're going to subdivide that now and go to our 16th notes like this. So forth and so on. That's just a little bit of looking at how we can use this for exercises. You can use it for scales, you can use it for just practicing your strum. The thing about the metronome is, and what's really great when you have an earpiece, is you got to be able to hear the click. So if you're playing really, really loud and suddenly you can't hear the metronome, it's not going to help you very much. So get it close to your head, get it close to your ear, or get the earbuds you use for your iPod or for your phones or whatever. Stick it right in the metronome, and then you can have it right in your ears, and then you can play as loud as you want to, and the two will come together, hopefully, more than likely. Another thing that you can use this for is when you're playing a piece of music that doesn't have any sort of notation about speeding up and slowing down, or playing rubato, which means speeding up and slowing down, basically. It's very, very important. Sometimes playing slow is a lot harder than playing fast. Actually, a lot of the time, it's harder than playing fast. And so I'm going to take this to 104, and I'm going to play a little something here. How about a little Spotted Pony? Lively tempo, very lively. That would be right at the end of Andante, 104. Now, let's cut that by half. Let's get down to 52 beats per minute. Oh my gosh. You really have to be patient now. The tendency is to rush, as you know. And I'll explain that in a second. But here we go. Man, that is tough. That is so tough. Why is it so tough? Well, imagine, if you will, and I've used this analogy while teaching workshops across the country. Imagine that you are walking down the street, and on your right side there's a white picket fence, and in your hand you got a 2x4. Naturally, what do? You take the 2x4, you run it across the white picket fence. And you maintain a consistent rate of speed as you're walking forward, so that the rattling of the board against the fence sounds nice and evenly, and it's very satisfactory to the ears. Now, what would happen if the slats in the fence, instead of being this close together, were a block apart, would you be able to maintain the same consistent forward motion and sound those slats at exactly the same time? It'd be very difficult because you'd be like, clack, okay, and where's your point of reference until you hit that next one? So that's where the subdivision comes in handy. I don't know about a block subdivision, but in your head, you might be thinking at this speed, if we go back down to 52 beats per minute, if that's our quarter note count and the slats are way far apart, think about your 8-note count. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Still too far apart? Think about your 16th note subdivision. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. Those subdivisions fill up the gap in between the quarter notes, the primary beats, and that helps you keep track of what's going on. I like to think of the quarter notes as very, very straight, 1, 2, 3, 4. I like to think of 8th notes as the ticking of a grandfather clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. And I like to think of the 16th notes as a choo-choo train. Choo-choo, 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 choo-choo. So even if you've got these, what am I looking for, mnemonic sort of things happening in your head, they will help you too. Or tapping your feet. That messes me up sometimes because I get into the groove and my feet start doing weird things and it throws me off. Whatever works best for you. But do absolutely work with a metronome about 50% of the time that you work with it. So if you work with it for a minute, use it for 30 seconds and then put it away and then do those same exercises or practice whatever you're practicing for 30 seconds. Use it half the time, calibrate your clock, and then the other half of the time, trust your clock and do it every single day. A lot of fantastic musicians that I know and a lot of professional musicians who have won Grammys every day use a metronome. There is no place you get to where all of a sudden you don't need one anymore, except for maybe Tony Banks of Genesis. And you've got to go listen to his music. He is absolutely amazing. In fact, go listen to the album Foxtrot, 1972. The song's called Supper's Ready. Listen to the keyboard playing of Tony Banks. That guy is absolutely insane. Anyway, the metronome is your friend. A lot of people hate it, but the more you use it, the better you will be at maintaining a nice consistent tempo, whether it's fast, slow, or completely and totally insane. I hope this has been helpful, and thank those of you who emailed me recently about that top 10 list, and I will be picking some other things from that list to expand upon in future episodes of Dulcimerica. But right now, I'm going to go out with some picking and some grinning. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Thank you.